We turn next to the late Bill O'Herlihy, broadcaster who died earlier this week and to whom so many tributes have been paid since his death was announced on Monday last. This morning from the archives, the first of two selections from Bill O'Herlihy's half-century of broadcasting. We'll have more next week, but we begin with this from Eamon Dunphy's interview series. Indeed, this interview began with Eamon Dunphy stating to Bill what he has said about him this week since his death, that in Dunphy's opinion, O'Herlihy was the best sports broadcaster anywhere. Here's the sequence.
And in my opinion, he's probably the best sports broadcaster in the world. His name, of course, is Bill O'Herlihy. Bill, good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamon. You're very flattering, I must say.
I always flatter my guests, but in this case, I have a particular view on sports broadcasting, and I think that if you were in America, Bill, you'd be a billionaire. However,
if they could understand the Cork accent.
Anyway, that's how it started. But Eamon Dunphy's first question to Bill O'Herlihy was how he had become interested in journalism.
My grandfather, William O'Herlihy, was the news editor of the Examiner, and his brothers were either working for, one of them was working for the Independent in Dublin and some in London as well. So there was a tradition, but it skipped my father's generation, and that's all I ever wanted to do.
Really?
Oh, from the word go, I wanted to be a journalist. And I remember I got my matric when I was 15, and I didn't want to go to university. I wanted to go into journalism. So my father brought me by the hand, metaphorically, into the Examiner when we met Tom Crosbie, the chairman.
Right.
And the Examiner, of course, was then and subsequently, for a long time, was a very paternalistic organisation. So I had a very short interview with Tom Crosbie. He said, Willie, he said, calling me like same as my grandfather, your grandfather, he said, was a wonderful journalist. Your pedigree, he said, in journalism, I'm sure will be terrific. We don't have a job, but when we have it, you'll get it. And about 6 months later, I got a letter from John Leland, who was the secretary, to say there was a job in the reading room, which was where all the journalists in the Examiner started in those days, and I'm talking about 50 years ago.
Yes, in you went.
In I went.
And you were what? You were starting out then?
I started off in the reading room. I was there for about, which was where you corrected all all the work of the printers, in effect. From the journalists to the printers, back to the reading room, and then the mistakes went in.
You would have been a lucky boy, because that would be regarded as a very good job to go into.
Oh, yeah.
A very coveted job.
Yeah.
At a time when, Ireland was not a prosperous country.
No, but I was very conscious of the fact that I was very privileged.
Bill O'Herlihy then began some broadcasting work for Newsbeat, the television programme which Frank Hall presented.
And Frank Hall was doing a programme on the 50th anniversary of the sinking of the Lusitania off Kinsale. But he wanted somebody to interview a survivor of the Lusitania, who happened to be, God love her, happened to be senile. After I did the tortured interview, as I saw it, with the lady, Frank Hall gave an instruction the following day that I was to do all the work out of Cork for him. And we worked up and down the country, and eventually I got I was offered a contract by RTE. And that's how I left Cork. And my mother, God rest her soul, was enraged that I was leaving this terrific job in the Examiner to take a chance for a one-year contract.
And, of course, you came to Dublin.
I think it was 68.
So that was the swinging 60s.
Yeah. I wasn't the swinger.
No, I don't think you were, Bill.
I was, unfortunately. Do you know a funny thing about television? A lot of people, I remember Pat Smiley, God rest his soul, saying to me one time, you don't take advantage of television at all. We were both single, and we were working together, he for the Irish Times, me for the Examiner. And he said, if I was on television, he'd say, I'd be making a killing with all these women.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about the fame thing.
It was the opposite. Television was very new to provincial Ireland when we'd go to places like Thurles and that kind of thing, and there'd be hundreds and hundreds of people would be watching us working, and we'd stop the traffic and all that kind of stuff. But you'd hear comments like, he's much smaller than I thought he was. He's not very good looking, is he? He's not a television type, So I actually nearly shrank unto myself at some when I was young, because I didn't have the confidence.
He was then recruited to 7 Days by its pioneering editor Muirish McAneill, and he was the reporter on the 7 Days programme which caused most controversy, an investigation into money lending in Dublin.
Bill, you did an investigative piece about money lending.
Illegal money lending.
Illegal money lending, and it caused terrible trouble. Tell me exactly what happened.
I think, first of all, you want to contextualise it. The 7 Days programme was by far and away the natural opponent of the government. It questioned the government. It was by far and away the best current affairs and the groundbreaking current affairs in comparison to anything that had gone before. And Fianna Fáil tried to get through the straight vote at one stage. And I remember David Thornley.
It was first past the post.
Yeah. And Basil Chubb and David Thornley did a survey and a programme based on it that said in the first Dáil, which was 144 seats, I think, at the time, something like that, Fianna Fáil in the first vote after that Dáil, if it was a straight vote, would have 111 seats. That was it. The Irish people wouldn't give anybody that kind of power. And there was a huge resentment in the Jack Lynch government, actually, against 7 days for having destroyed their great plan and design. So when we did the story on illegal money lending, we used hidden cameras, we used hidden microphones. Funnily enough, when Mirish McAneil, who was a wonderful editor, saw it, the first time he thought it was too soft. So we had to go out and we had to get to harden it up and get some moneylenders who kind of whether some people say they took from the credibility of the programme, but they certainly made it a great deal more dramatic.
Are you an unlicensed moneylender?
Yes.
And this is from the money lending programme in November 1969, 7 days. Bill O'Herlihy reporting.
I used to drive them around in a back trap with collect money. So I seen they could get money easy, so I decided I'd try it.
The government saw it as an opportunity to get at current affairs. It wasn't at all about me. I was only a pawn in the whole thing. They were after Mirish. But more importantly, they saw at that stage that current affairs was, our RT was part of the kind of government service. It should not be opposing the government of the day, whoever it had to be, in the way that they felt that current affairs was doing. So they were determined to put manners on current affairs, and they took that as an example.
Well, you broadcast the programme.
Yeah.
And
what happened was that when the programme was broadcast, it created an extraordinary stir, because nobody had ever used hidden cameras, nobody had ever used hidden microphones, that kind of stuff.
Yet you, who talk so much about honour, you use violence if necessary.
Well, I mean, I never use violence.
But you instruct people to use violence.
True. If I think they're going to get the better of me. See, I gave them my word and they gave me their word, and now they're breaking it. So it's up to themselves. I give them the best of chances.
But do you operate on the basis of people being totally in fear of what might happen if they don't pay back?
Oh, no.
Aren't people afraid that you will use violence on them?
No.
But you have done this.
Oh, I have. Well, I haven't exactly, but I've gave orders to do it.
An excerpt from Bill O'Herlihy's interview with a moneylender on that 7 days programme.
And it was a groundbreaking programme from that point of view. But the government decided that they would have to investigate this, that they wouldn't under any circumstances accept the findings of the programme. So a tribunal was
Were you critical of the Gardaí, for example?
By
who were you
implication.
fingering? You were saying this is going on.
And
nobody in authority is
was doing anything about it.
The problem,
including the guards.
Right.
Exactly. But it wasn't actually fingering the guards as such. It was making it clear that there were a series of illegal moneylenders who were actually making life a misery for people,
right,
at the very lowest level of society, and that it was it created an extraordinary stir. People were appalled at what they saw, appalled at what they heard.
You alleged that there were hundreds of moneylenders.
Oh, there were some, and you see, I asked the question inevitably: if you're an illegal moneylender, you have no recourse to the law. What do you do? Well, you'd break their leg, or you'd do this, that. You'd harm them personally and physically, and that, of course, was a hugely upsetting thing for the people as well.
What kind of violence have you used on people? Or
give them a threat, and if they don't like that, they get hurt.
In what way? What exactly do you do?
They might get a few punches and they'll be told, just pay what you owe and it will happen to you. If not, then the next time you'll get worse.
So, and what exactly will be worse?
Well, you never know. We plan that out. We see if he's a man in a good position, we do things that he'll be sorry for.
Have you put people in hospital?
Oh no, I've never put anybody in hospital. I never touched a person in my life, but some of my boys did. I gave my instructions, lost their temper, and I told them, stupid you are. But you get us all into trouble.
If you give instructions to your boys, as you call them, to beat people up, do you regard that as leaving your slate particularly clean because you personally are not involved in the violence?
Well,
I'm giving instructions to use violence.
I don't want them to hurt people that much to send them to hospital. I just want them to check them.
But you want to get your money back, principally?
Oh, yes.
And you go to any extreme to get your money back?
Well, you don't go in for killing or anything like that.
But you go as close as possible to serious injury?
To hurt them, yes.
And this is honourable in your estimation?
Well, why not? They're asking for it. Would you not say so?
Was the allegation in part sensationalism?
Obviously, they would have thought that. I didn't think it was. Although, mind you, if I was to be honest about it, if I was to go back now, I'd have eliminated a couple of sentences out of it. But I think fundamentally it was not sensational.
Now,
it was true.
A tribunal of inquiry, something we've become very used to now, was set up by the government.
That's
correct?
right. That was the first one after the Locks Tribunal.
Yeah, to investigate the veracity of your reporting and RTE's reportage.
Correct.
And its findings were
that the programme was not authentic and that I was irresponsible and Marish McAneil, the editor, was irresponsible. No, you couldn't have a worse finding, really, in a sense.
How long did you have to endure this inquiry and controversy?
It was about, if I remember correctly, it was 52 days in the High Court. Now, you have to recognise that, first of all, the government said they would have 3 judges of the Supreme Court. They couldn't get any judge to sit on it. It was too obviously political. They had 3 judges then of the High Court. One of them had a very serious row at 7 days within the previous year. One was a director of elections for Fianna Fáil in Dún Laoghaire Rathdown, and the other was a recently appointed judge, who apparently, I was talking to his son a couple of years later, he said he didn't approve of the verdict at all. He was going to write a minority report, but he was told not to do that and eventually climbed down. So the whole thing was very... It was called by one lawyer to me one day as the Alice in Wonderland Tribunal.
Were your colleagues in print journalism supportive? Somewhere, not all. I mean, there was a certain amount of sensationalism in the evening press reportage of it, you know. Were the people in RTE supportive?
Publicly, yes. I'd say they were. The argument, yes. There were some wonderful... I mean, Tom Hardiman was the DG, outstandingly supportive, and so indeed was the Director of Personnel at the time. And he was fantastic as well. So, at a certain level, there was great...
How tough was it for you?
It was very tough because...
Was your career on the line?
Oh, there's no question of it. I mean, day one, I was considered a wonderful journalist, and this was a wonderful programme. Day 52 of the tribunal, I was considered a terrible gobshite.
Right.
And that I'd walked the station into trouble unnecessarily, and that fundamentally, people thought that like the balloon had been punctured and I'd been damaged. And I remember walking around the corridors with Marish when Marish was appointed Director General or Director of Broadcasting in Radio the Gaeltachta, and he had his arm around me and he said, "Bill," he said, "you know what this means? I'm leaving here. You're in trouble."
Yeah.
And I was told ultimately that 7 days was taken off the air to avoid actually, doing anything that might be seen to be vindictive against me. And they decided to take...
Were you married then to Hillary?
I was married only a very short time.
Did you get the sack?
Did I get the sack?
Yeah.
I didn't. No, you see, Marish was very clever. We all had...
He was banished to Radio na Gaeltachta.
Well, I don't know whether he was banished or not. It was certainly... like in executive terms, I suppose it was an upward move, but it was seen by some people as something that he wouldn't necessarily desire, but he took it anyway because he was a great Irishman as well. But I got a nibble from the Irish Times. Would I be interested in joining the Irish Times? And I remember talking to Oliver Maloney, and I said to Oliver that I'd been given that. He said, "Don't leave this place under any circumstances." He said, "You have nothing to be ashamed of." And of course, to think about it, Marish had given us all 2-year contracts, which some of the people didn't know. So when the programme was taken off the air, we had 15 months to go, at least 15, maybe 18 months to go on the contract. So they had to give us something to do. So Oliver said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, "I want to go into sport." "Into sport you'll go." But Mick O'Hare never wanted me.
Right.
"I don't want you," he said. "You haven't the right image for sport," he said. "But having said that, you're welcome." And then I worked, and I had...
He was a legendary broadcaster.
But I tell you one thing, to be fair to Mick now, I have to finish the story. He, I did a lot. I was well trained in 7 days. I came up with an awful lot of good ideas for sports programmes. And I remember about 3 months after I joined the place, he came out and he put his arm around me and he said, "Bill," he said, "I didn't want you, but thanks be to God you're here."
Right.
So fair play to him.
And that's the inside story told to Eamon Dunphy there of how inadvertently that 7 days report on moneylending altered the course of Bill O'Herlihy's career. In next week's programme, we'll bring you parts of other interviews he recorded over the years. Some account of his subsequent career as a sports anchor for 10 Olympic Games and 10 World Soccer Cups.
I'm delighted to tell you we have a very happy programme, and politics dominates an awful lot of the discussions off air and all kinds of things. And Giles was fascinating, I can tell you, always about the damage that Mrs. Thatcher had done to the community spirit in the UK, and how she had transformed the UK.
We begin with Bill O'Herlihy, whose early career in current affairs broadcasting we covered last week. This morning, how he rescued his TV career to become one of the stars of RTE television sports.
But Mick O'Hare never wanted me.
And said so, as you heard last week, on day one.
I don't want you, he said. You haven't the right image for sport, he said. But having said that, you're welcome.
And within weeks, after a lengthy programme meeting, Micheál O'Hare went out of his way to make some amends.
I remember about 3 months after I joined the place, he came out and he put his arm around me and he said, Bill, he said, I didn't want you, but thanks be to God you're here.
And the rest, as we all know, is history. Bill O'Herlihy anchored 10 Olympic Games and 10 Soccer World Cups.
I've never been to any big event that I've anchored in RTE. I've never been to the Olympics, and I've done, this year, if God spares me my health, I'll be doing my 10th. Never been to any one of them. I've never been to the European Track and Field Championships, the World Track and Field Championships. I've done everything from the studio.
This from an interview with Catherine Thomas.
That's pretty unusual. You were asked in 78 to go to the World Cup.
I was, but I would have been about the very much the down the line commentator, and I took a tactical decision that did I want to be involved in the last 2 minutes of the worst possible match, even though I'd be in Argentina, which I would have enjoyed for a month. And I said, no, I'd rather do the studio. And I was the one-eyed man in the Valley of the Blind. There was nobody left, so they gave it to me.
So that was your time to cut the cloth in studio.
There you are.
Fantastic.
And it was the best decision I ever made, let's be honest about
Absolutely.
it. Absolutely. Because whatever talent I've got as a presenter, I would have been a hopeless commentator.
The occasion of this interview was RTE Television's launch of its coverage of what was Bill O'Herlihy's 9th World Cup.
Well, I have to start by saying last Saturday's Irish Times, the interview with yourself and Dunphy and Giles, I laughed out loud so many times. I thought it was brilliant, and I thought it gave a real insight into the relationship between the three of you.
That's true. Well, I think Mary Hannigan is a very good journalist for a start. And secondly, the three of us, we're like, as I said before, we're like a repertory company. We all know our roles. And very definitely, I must understand exactly what my role is. I am not an expert. I am the man representing the plain people of Ireland. And if I stray beyond that, I get into trouble. Because anytime I profit an expert view, I am told I am not the analyst. Leave the analysis to the analysts.
Leave them to it.
Yes, exactly. But having said all that, we have a very, very happy programme, a very enjoyable programme. We all respect each other's talents, and I think that came across in the interview.
But don't take away from yourself too much, because you are renowned in the industry. You do your homework. It's meticulous preparation. You have a very extensive
knowledge. I've great
knowledge.
editors as well, don't forget.
But also, it is for people like me who love football, but, I don't know the ins and the outs of it, and you actually speak to the punter as well. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the World Cup, but I'm not I don't know everything there is to know about it.
In 1990, I think it was, when Ireland were involved, we actually did research on the audience, who exactly understood the game. And we were shocked to discover, well, some of us were shocked to discover, only about 32% of the people understood the game. So that automatically means that as the anchorman, your function, you have three experts in front of you. You have to make sure that they bring across the strengths and weaknesses of a particular match in a way that the people understand, so they increase their knowledge of the game, and that's exactly my function.
And do you have an idea of the demographic as well? Even watching back in 1990, there was probably loads of women watching.
According to the research done, somebody said it was the most comprehensive research ever done in sport, and we were told. Now I can only tell you, dúirt fear liom go dúirt fear lé, that apparently everybody over the age of 4 watched RTE. Therefore, it was the entire country. But we had a magnificent editor in Maurice Reedy, and he took the correct view, which was this. This is not just a soccer event. This is the first time Ireland have been in the World Cup, therefore it's a major national occasion. So he brought in everybody. The GA were involved in it, rugby were involved in it, all kinds of sports, hockey, everybody. So the coverage that we had in RTE reflected the entire country and the mood of the country. We were in schools, we were in clubs, wherever. So that really, in a sense, because of the way we approached it, it didn't surprise me at the end of the day that everybody was watching it, and our figures would be hugely better than BBC, ITV or Sky.
And that was the thing, it took a long time. I mean, you weren't really given the credibility against the BBC and ITV for a long time.
Oh, that's true. Sure, poor old Jimmy McGee had an awful time because Jimmy was the kind of pathfinder in the sense that he had to go out there and he was doing the cup finals and whatever coverage RT was doing, which was against, though, the credibility of the BBC. And that was a huge problem for Jimmy at the start. But to be fair to him, he came through and he began the process of change. And then in here, the whole question of the say the panels coming and becoming involved. Mike Horgan was the person who introduced that. In fact, Eamon Dunphy told me a curious thing, that he actually suggested to ITV that when he was working in England that they should have a panel. But and they
took his idea but left him out of it. And wasn't it also Dunphy who approached you to get Giles to join the team?
No, he didn't approach me. He approached Tim O'Connor.
Right.
You see, it's when you go back to, we're I don't know, nearly 30 years working together at this stage, and we used to be working in a continuity studio. No director in there. You'd have a green light, and once the green light went on, you started talking. There was no commercial breaks or anything like that. When the match came to half time, you covered the 15 minutes, and then you went back, and whatever time you had before and after, you did it. And Dunphy and I developed a very good relationship with each other, and I found him a fascinating person to talk to because he had a vision that transcended just the technicalities of the game. So that's how it started with us. And but he came to the conclusion, and both of us share this view, that really we needed a third person. And Giles was the third person chosen. Now, Giles had a very bad reputation with the media because he had no time for media, never spoke to the media when he was manager of the Irish team. And that was largely because he didn't feel he should leave down his players and be forensic in an examination of his team.
Yeah, so he had to keep his distance to
exactly.
a certain extent.
So he did all that internally, but he wouldn't do it externally, which meant he wasn't very good with the media from that point of view. Therefore, he was a surprising choice. From my perspective, I was totally intimidated at the idea of Giles joining us, with all his knowledge, his reputation. I said, Mother of God, I'm going to be in desperate trouble. And I found him a pleasure to work with.
And the three of you work so well together. So let's talk World Cup. Let's talk Italia 90 because...
But except do not expect me to be Jimmy McGee, because one of my great fears is somebody comes along and asks me to solve a bet. Who played right half or whatever it might have been way back when? I have no idea in the world.
Okay, I'll give you an easy one. What's your favourite memory of Italia 90?
Oh, my favourite memory has to be involved with Ireland, and it has to be the penalty shootout against Romania. That has to be that.
Okay, well,
with David O'Leary involved in the final penalty.
Let's take a listen.
This kick can decide it all. The nation holds its breath. Yes, we're there!
Oh, fantastic. I said at the start, ciao Roma. Buongiorno Roma. What do you think, lads? Magic.
Magic. And was that when they cut back to you? You had the cap on your head with the big clapping hands.
I got it from Tig the Brunt, who belonged to his young fella, and he brought it in. I said, I must have that. But
you were, and also I remember you were jumping around the studio, and then they cut back to the three of you sitting there. I mean, but you could tell you could not contain the excitement.
That's right. But in fact, actually, the reality was we were dancing around the place when Ireland got through to the quarterfinals. But it was never shown, obviously, because they were concentrating on other things. Yeah. But I was talking to Jack Charlton. I did a very testy interview with Charlton for a Christmas special after that, and I said it to him that was, George had a wonderful phrase there, the nation holds its breath, and it certainly did. There was no question of it, because if we missed it, we were gone. And I said to Jack, it was fantastic for O'Leary to take it, to volunteer to take it and get it. And he was quite dismissive. He said, much harder to take the first one. Of course, he never had much time for O'Leary anyway, as far as I could see.
He was asked how RTE's presentation of sports compared with British stations.
We're much more blunt, I think. And in fact, I make it very clear to anybody joining the panel, you will not play the populist role. We want integrity in our comments, and people go along with that. And people like Graham Souness, who works in other channels as well, loves working with us on the grounds that he says you can say what you want, and you can have terrific arguments that you never get anywhere else.
That's a great testament, isn't it?
That is, of course, yeah.
Bill O'Herlihy with Catherine Thomas. Winds the clock on 4 years later, and Bill O'Herlihy is again in studio, preparing now for his final anchoring of a World Cup, talking this time to Sean O'Rourke. Again, the main talking point is the panel and the extraordinary chemistry between them and Bill.
I'm delighted to tell you we have a very happy programme, and politics dominates an awful lot of the discussions off air and all kinds of things. And Giles was fascinating, I can tell you, always about the damage that Mrs. Thatcher had done to the community spirit in the UK, and how she had transformed the UK. So we've had immensely enjoyable conversations apart from the soccer.
One thing that I was thinking, just going over going through the book last night, Bill
O'Herlihy's autobiography was launched at the start of that World Cup campaign.
Those two gentlemen had huge rows and falling outs. I think initially was it in 1992 when Giles was critical of Dunphy's book about Matt Busby, and then there was one afterwards, 2004 was it? The row was, but also there was about Giles' sort of presence on the field and how he made it felt, we'll say, and Dunphy had serious.
That row was actually the serious row. The second row was about Dunphy on the Late Show, I think it was. Said he was an Uncle Tom because he was supporting the FAI rather than Dunphy's argument, and that cut very deeply. But the other one was a lot more serious. That went on. I thought, no, the lads will tell you it only went on for a few weeks. It went on for a lot more than that. And they would come into the studio. They wouldn't talk to each other. They would talk to me. But Tim O'Connor and Mike Horgan were in charge of football, and they just made it very clear to them, look, I don't care if you ever talk again, but you better not show it on air. And they didn't. They would be as thick as thieves on air, and then they wouldn't talk at all afterwards.
My point, though, is that these things seem to happen at 10-yearly or thereabouts intervals. You must be due another one.
Well, I hope not, since this is my last World Cup. I wouldn't think so. They're very friendly. They are genuinely very friendly now,
Yeah, and you obviously, we mentioned your heart earlier. In fact, we're going to be talking to Professor Owen O'Brien in a few minutes. But you got a right good scare in your early 40s, didn't you?
I did. In fact, actually, it was just before the Olympic Games in where was Los Angeles, and
the 84 one, yeah.
Yeah, and I was at a particular meeting, but one of the companies I handled in public relations was Park, and Park had a hospital in Baghdad, and the director of medicine in Baghdad was actually in Dublin to talk to the College of Surgeons, and they asked me would I come to the lunch, and I said it's very unlikely because this meeting the RT meeting would last a long time, and in fact it didn't last a long time. So I went to the lunch, and I had a pain down my hand and a slight pain in my chest. So Harry Coonahan, he's dead now, God rest him, was the doctor, and he said to me, is there something wrong with you? And I explained it, and he went over, he picked up the phone to the Richmond Hospital, to John Horgan, and I was brought into there, and I was there about 18 days, and I was in the middle of, I was at the start of a heart attack, and they told me that I'd have to get bypass surgery, and I said no, I didn't want it, but in fact they said if this recurs you have to have it, so I did. But I was very lucky. John Horgan was a magnificent cardiologist, and I'm giving this message now to anybody who's ever had a heart attack, because I did not want to go back to television. And I was very, very insecure because I felt that any strain in my heart at all and I'd be gone after the bypasses, because I looked at bypasses almost like a transplant, And John Horgan said to me, no, Bill, he said, you have two options. You can lead a normal life, or you can become a cardiac cripple. If you become a cardiac cripple, your life will be destroyed. So as I said before, metaphorically, he took me by the hand, brought me back to television, which I can tell you was quite traumatic for the first broadcast. It was an outside broadcast. The fellows were wondering, was I going to die on air? But in fact, I got through it. And once I got through it, I was finished. But only for him, I would have said no.
That was 30 years ago.
84,
yeah,
84,
yeah.
And then I had cancer 5 years ago. But again, that wasn't a big deal because the John Horgan philosophy carried through.
I'd say it was at the time, though.
It was, but I was very lucky as well because it was colon cancer, and I was told if you have to get cancer, that's the best cancer to get. So I'm grand again, thank God.
And I suppose the other thing is, well, I want to ask you two more questions about the World Cup.
You didn't ask any so far, did you?
Well, in a peripheral way, but it's been a wonderful conversation. In fact, the listeners are people. They're singing your praise. Love the honest interview with Bill. Refreshingly honest, they say. I don't know whether that's from Cork or wherever, but I'm sure lots of people are thinking the same thing. And do you think there's any chance that we'll see Giles talking up Ronaldo before this is all over?
As long as he doesn't take off his jersey and throw it into the crowd. I know in fairness to Giles reckons on Ronaldo as a player, but not necessarily as a person. You know, he thinks he's a fantastic player, but he doesn't like the way he goes on and doesn't like some of the things he does.
And no, just as a kind of a quirky little thing, I texted my contact in Paddy Powers this morning, looked for odds on whether Dunphy would weep on air in the course of the coverage of this World
Why?
Cup.
Why would he weep on air?
Well, just people who saw him with Gay Byrne last Sunday night on Getting a Life or whatever that programme, The Meaning of Life. He did a lot of it that time. Anyway, 3-1 were the odds. He might weep at the very end.
He might weep at my departure. Well, I tell you this much: he will not, because Dara Maloney is taking over for me. No, I tell you, I've watched Dara Maloney. I have an awful lot of regard for him. Dara Maloney, in many, many respects, is better than I am. There'll be a cultural change, unquestionably. The lads have been working with me for like 1987, I think Dunphy and I started, or sometime like that. They will find it a big change. But the change will happen, and Dara will grow into it, and Dara will be. I'll be forgotten in 6 months. I'm telling you.
Maybe a year, Bill.
Maybe a year. But I definitely will be forgotten.
Well, that is unlikely. The great Bill O'Herlihy from the archives, talking in our interviews this morning with Eamon Dunphy, Catherine Thomas and Sean O'Rourke.